Hi, everybody. Today's Tuesday, January 14th, and our friend Laith Marouf is back with us. Welcome back, Laith.
Thank you for having me, Nima.
And please let us know how can we support you and the work that you're doing, and which is so important for the region and Gazans and Palestinians.
People can go to our website, freepalestine.video, and you can subscribe for monthly donations or one-time donation. And you can follow us on all the social media platforms. We're on over 12 platforms. We've been had lost our YouTube channel, but right now we're opening a new one. So pretty soon we'll be back there. We'll see. Hopefully, all the viewers that we had will return to that station. But it's very important, obviously, the donations. We're producing upwards of 10 reports a day from the West Bank, Lebanon, and Jordan in English, stories that are not covered in the mainstream media. It's not commentary, it's actual news that people need access to.
Laith, let's get started with what's going on in Doha, Qatar, right now. And it seems that they they're reaching some sort of agreement. How do you see it? Can we stay optimistic about what's going on in Qatar, or are we gonna see the same sort of negotiations that we had before?
Well, it seems that it's a little bit different this time, and the crucial difference is President Trump, who is not in office yet, but he sent his own personal envoy to these negotiations. So it wasn't only the envoy of President Biden sitting on the negotiations, but also Trump. And looking at how the Israeli media have been covering this over the last 24 hours. They're talking about basically the envoy of Trump, rudely telling the Israelis, sign here, and you're going to have to follow these orders. So maybe it's a media ploy, I don't know, that just to make Trump look in control as an emperor in this empire. But we can knowing that there is nothing different in this new agreement than what was already approved by Hamas over 8 months ago, the Biden peace treaty or ceasefire conditions exactly the same. It looks like, obviously, that Biden and his regime could have forced Israel to do what Trump is now forcing them to do. And their coddling of the Zionists and giving Netanyahu anything that he wants, and the protection of on the international scene that they gave to the Zionists in the courts and the UN and so on, that actually what they got in return from Netanyahu is to be spat in their face. So clearly, the administration in the United States of Biden were the crucial factor in the continuation of this genocide. So whichever way we take this, whether it's propaganda just to make Trump look good or not, it shows that the United States could have ended this genocide anytime it wanted to. And only the subservience of Biden and Blinken and so on to Netanyahu is what made this genocide continue.
Do you think that Donald Trump would be different from Joe Biden in terms of the support going to Israel, or this is a tactical move on their part?
It's too early to tell. Whether these are all just theatrics to prepare the coming of Trump, and whether there will be change in the overall policies of the United States in the region. The occupation in Iraq and Syria continues. The looting of oil and gas of Syria and Iraq continues. The US is expanding its presence in Syria. The Israelis are expanding their occupation of South Syria. And there's also the ceasefire in Lebanon that will end 7 days after the coming of Trump. Will all any of these change? I don't know. We need to wait and see. But a few indications of where Trump is going. We can look at the statements over the last week and his statements over the last 24 hours. Number one, about taking over Greenland, Canada, and Panama, which, in my opinion, is the smartest move any emperor in the United States could have done. You know, we're in the age where there is no more international law, where there are no regulations for war. You can genocide and destroy whole societies and target hospitals and journalists and so on. This is the reality we live in. You can colonize and occupy lands as you wish, as has happened in Syria by Turkey, the Israelis, the Americans, in the open. You can walk into a parliament like that of Lebanon and appoint a president and prime minister in 5 days, for, you know, openly as an imperial colonial power. Okay, so Trump is actually being honest. Why does Canada need to exist? It's a vessel. It's a gas station for the United States. It's you know, all the mines and natural resources of Canada are owned by the U.S. and exported to the U.S. and maintain the industry of the U.S. Why waste money on a fake parliament in Canada and a fake government and all that entails in terms of expenditures? Just give them one seat in the parliament, in the Congress of the US, basically. This is all you need to do. And you can save so much money as an empire. So he's doing this in the open. So what does this mean? He's gonna try to clearly control the Western Hemisphere, at least the North and Central America, directly, and therefore create a new fortress America that's much bigger and only has oceans between it and any other enemy that could compete with it. So how will this affect the situation in the Middle East? We also heard him just in the last 24 hours saying that he's going to meet with President Putin as fast as possible, and that's an indication that he will be ending the war in Ukraine. Will the United States withdraw from the rest of West Asia to concentrate on Central and Latin America? How is the relationship with Mexico, with both the threat of declaring the drug cartels as terrorist organizations, which will authorize the American military to invade Mexico, basically, and attack these quote-unquote terrorist organizations, and the 20 million refugees that he wants to dump on Mexico? How is that going to play out, and how will that affect everything here in the region and the extending of American power to here?
And getting back to Gaza and the West Bank, do we know if they're talking about the West Bank and the northern part of Gaza in this sort of agreement?
Yeah, it seems this agreement only covers Gaza. So I've seen some people ask online, so what does this mean to the attacks that are happening in the West Bank? I think that's going to continue. And the leaked papers that are coming out, we should be probably having a full agreement today, according to all the sources. But you never know. Again, we're in a crazy world today. But looking at the pages that got leaked, there's 5 points. Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. First off, ceasefire, obviously stopping all the military activities. Second is like withdrawal from the access of Philadelphia access, basically the border with Egypt and the Rafah crossing, and the withdrawal from around the Netzarim crossing on the other side, the north part of the Gaza Strip, and then the exchange of prisoners. The Israelis are saying they will not be giving back the body of Sinwar, which they, are holding since they killed him. And then there will be beginnings of aid arriving into the Strip and the beginnings of reconstruction. This is like the 5 steps. But everybody should be cautious because it says it's only 45 days of ceasefire. So just like in Lebanon, there was a 60-day ceasefire agreement where the Israelis are supposed to finalize all their obligations and then the end of hostilities. But it doesn't seem like the Israelis are yet withdrawing. So what will happen really in those 45 days? And will Israel return in, to attacks on Gaza after the 45 days? These are all questions that we don't have answers to. But given the history of the Zionist regime, its violations of every agreement that it ever signed, and given the history of the United States itself as a broker, I wouldn't be that sure of a permanency to this ceasefire.
If we assume that they can reach a comprehensive agreement on Gaza and the situation in Gaza, what would be the next? As you mentioned, there has to be some sort of aid from outside to Gazans, but we know that Israel has destroyed each and every hospital, school in Gaza. What would be the next step on the part of the Muslim countries, which is so important for Gazans?
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine just the removal of the rubble? I mean, this is going to take years just to remove the rubble. There's so much destruction. And at least 8 Hiroshimas, basically. This is the least number. They stopped counting how many Hiroshimas, basically. So things are not going to get back to even the occupation normal, because there's nothing normal about what was happening in Gaza prior to the beginnings of the genocide. But even going back to that, it's going to take years. And so the rubble removal, a lot of the highly educated populations, including the health workers and the teachers and the university professors and so on, were a primary target for genocide. They were followed one by one. So how is this society going to even service itself? If you try to open back all these hospitals, how many doctors do you have from what you had in terms of percentage left? How many nurses, ambulance workers? Similarly for the schools and the universities. So the Israelis purposefully targeted the educated cadre in Gaza to make it even hard to come back. And so we're not only talking about rebuilding hospitals, we're going to be talking about how are we going to staff these hospitals. We're not talking only about rebuilding the schools and the universities. How are you going to staff them? So it's huge problems in the future for the Palestinian people in Gaza, and that's if the actually Israelis deliver on their promises and agreements, and if the Arabic and Muslim world comes to the aid, because there's no way Gaza can rebuild itself without direct aid coming in. This is the most devastated society on the planet momentarily, and there's nothing even to grow. The basic thing is, how are they going to even rebuild their farms? The land is been destroyed, all the water sources destroyed, everything destroyed. So it's a daunting thing. And looking at the last 14 months, the failures of the Arab states and the Muslim states that mostly collaborated with the imperial order, only the axis of resistance that stood with the Palestinians. Everybody else actually collaborated in the open or in the closed doors against the Palestinian people. and we're hoping for the defeat of the axis of resistance that we saw. Similarly, how they collaborated to destroy Syria in the midst of this genocide. The backbone of the axis of resistance wiped off the map doesn't exist because of the collaboration of the Arabic and Muslim vessels.
Do you hope that they're going to change their behavior right now? Because the Biden administration was so, I would say, was the worst administration that we've seen so far in terms of their policies, not only in Ukraine, but also in Gaza, because they have provided Israel with everything they needed to destroy Gaza. And right now, if they achieve this agreement between Hamas, between Gazans, between Palestinians and Israel, I don't put it, I don't give any sort of credit to the Biden administration, because I think the new administration is looking for some sort of solution for their sort of a strategy for the whole world. But how about the Muslim countries? Are they going to revise? Are they going to reconsider their policies? Because the way that they're behaving right now, it can happen to Syria as well. It can happen to any point. In the West Bank, the situation is not good.
Yes, I think it's hard to teach an old dog a new trick. And you definitely can't straighten a dog's tail. You have to chop it off. These are, for the most part, in the Arabic and Muslim world, regimes that have been directly under Western and American control since the end of World War II, if not before. So I am of the opinion that these regimes, these vassals, will not change their positionality at all. And look at how they're already gunning for even Egypt. Okay, even though Egypt is a vassal itself, and but just the fact that it's a huge country with 110 million people, its existence, its mere existence, is a threat. That at any point, because maybe as a quote unquote republic with a big military, that there could be a revolution from inside the military, and suddenly you have a revolutionary liberationist leader in Egypt. So in order to avoid that possibility, even in the future, they want to break up Egypt and drown it in a civil war somehow with the Wahhabi death squads. We saw this HTS commander giving the speech calling basically for an armed rebellion in Sinai and Egypt, and flying the old British installed monarchy's flag. So this platform of media was given to this guy from the Gulf monarchs that are supposed to be like the friends of the other vessel in Egypt, Sisi. And the money to these Wahhabi death squads is coming from the Gulf countries that are controlled by the US. So the future doesn't look good for the region as long as Arabic oil and gas and its revenues are used with such huge amounts to defeat any progressive Arabic unificationist, liberationist, even Muslim liberationist ideologies and groups. This has been the reality since the 1940s, since the end of World War II. This money is all used in that purpose, and also uplifting the economies of the West with all the money being put in American and Western banks that comes from this oil and gas revenue. As long as that's the reality, it's been 80 years like this. It's hard to defeat that, and there's not going to be any change. So I'm of the opinion that only if we can change the leadership and control of those Gulf states, we can then think about bigger projects in the region. Otherwise, we're just stuck in this whirlwind of nonstop war that the West causes.
Yeah. Right now in Lebanon, we have a new president and prime minister. You mentioned it in your talk, in your description about the situation in Gaza. But right now, with the situation that we are witnessing with the new prime minister, what can we expect from these people? Are they gonna have some sort of mutual understanding with Hezbollah, with those people who want to defend Lebanon, who are concerned about the situation with Israel? Israel is still in Lebanon and they didn't withdraw from Lebanon.
Yeah, so the appointment of the president, Joseph Aoun, General Joseph Aoun, was a humiliation, I think, for Lebanon, because everybody watched all these ambassadors sitting in the parliament and basically ordering the vote, and the constitution of Lebanon was ripped up, basically, to make sure that this guy becomes the president, because the constitution says you cannot run for the position of president of Lebanon if you are a grade 1 civil servant in the state of Lebanon, meaning the head of the army is that grade. You need to be retired and or resigned for at least 2 years before you run for the president position. This is partially to make sure that the country doesn't become a military dictatorship. And so they rammed through the vote without even having a vote to suspend this article in the Constitution. It was an amazing display of return to colonial era, such ways. And the first vote he didn't get the 2/3, and then they had a break for 2 hours, and he met with Hezbollah's bloc and the bloc of the patriotic movement, which is one of the Christian Lebanese parties that was of the former president was a member of. Those were the only two parties that actually had any say and weight on the coming president to have meetings and assurances that they would need for them to vote on him. The rest of the parties in the country showed themselves to be totally captured by the US because they all waived immediately the vote. Anyway, so he got into a position as president. And the surprising thing was not that. The more surprising thing was the rush to appoint a new prime minister so fast that the new president even didn't know about. And the new prime minister, Salam, is the judge, former head of the ICJ, the International Criminal Court of Justice, that is pursuing the Israeli government for genocide in Gaza. And he was rushed back in from Paris. Today he's going to be sworn in. And the new president was shocked and at the speed and the name he didn't even have in. So clearly there is too many cooks in the kitchen. The local vessels like the Saudis, who have now gained and took over all the influence that Syria used to have in Lebanon, meaning now it controls both the prime minister and president position. Before it used to be Syria that has a say in the president position, and Saudi had the say in the prime minister. The rush to put the prime minister by the Saudis, I think, even surprised the Americans. They were not ready as an embassy here, but that's where the wrangling is happening right now between the local vessels of the US to see who has more say in Lebanon, and clearly the Saudis have more say. But one thing to note from the new Prime Minister Salam is because he had to resign as the head of the ICJ just appointed the Ugandan judge that was on the case for the Gaza genocide, and she was the only judge that voted against charging the Israelis with genocide. Now she is the head judge in the ICJ. So this is, again, something is happening even to influence what's happening in the ICJ. This is the implications of the destruction of Syria and the loss of its influence, and the imbalance that is causing within Lebanon is also reaching implications all the way in the International Court of Justice.
Leith, what's important, what's so crucial for Hezbollah right now in terms of internal policies in Lebanon? And what are the main disagreements between Hezbollah and these people who came into power?
I think Hezbollah right now is playing things safe. Okay, what it sees is that the government of Lebanon, the space that it had as influence with the presence of the Syrian government and the Iranian government, is now diminishing. Okay, so what does this mean? Hezbollah had entered politics in the 2000s just to guarantee its successes after 2006, and the formulas that it put didn't want the government to be a factor to play against the resistance. But it was a reluctance entrance into politics. The experiment over the last 20 years, or less than 20 years, it showed that, all you're going to get from being in the government is to be associated with the corruption that is there. And in the end, the maximum influence Hezbollah can have in the Lebanese government is to minimize the damage. That's all it can do. Okay, and have early warning on the plots that could be happening against it. That's the maximum influence that Hezbollah can have in the governments in the last 20 years. And therefore, well, you know what? What matters in Lebanon is what's the reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground is the Shia population in Lebanon is the most united. There is no division amongst it, and it's all behind the resistance. And it will be impossible for any internal parties in Lebanon, including the Lebanese military, to actually go into a head-on confrontation because that Hezbollah will defeat any force inside Lebanon. And, therefore, again, there's no need to waste too much time about the government, given that it's fully now American type. We are seeing, I think, a return to the prominence of the military wing of Hezbollah to comparison to the political wing that rose into more influence over the last 20 years. And just to also add one thing, people may think that since the fall of Syria, Hezbollah has been having problems bringing in weapons, but the truth is the furthest from that. Because of the collapse of the Syrian government, right now, you can go into Syria. Any civilians are doing this. Go into Syria, and they're selling weapons in the black market there at prices of weight by kilo. Okay, they're not even literally. This is how they are doing it. The shorter Kalashnikov that has a shorter shoulder usually is more expensive than the one that has the longer shoulder. Well, it's cheaper. It's selling cheaper, and it's selling at a fraction of the market price. You can buy like a Kalashnikov for $50-$60. It's supposed to be $1,000-something in the Lebanese market. Similarly, anything you can go and so Lebanese civilians from Hezbollah's community in general uh, are rearming themselves, their personal armaments, because just a note there is that people in the south of Lebanon, they don't just wait for Hezbollah to give them weapons. They all build their own personal arsenal. And so you can go and build your own personal arsenal, buy it all from Syria with less than $1,500. That includes rocket launchers, includes ATGMs, includes Katyushas and so on, and come back, and nobody stops you. This is how easy right now and how much cheaper it is actually. So yeah, Hezbollah has been rearming very, very fast, and what happened in Syria actually is backfiring on the empire.
Not only the way that you're describing the situation in Syria, we've learned recently from the Jerusalem Post that according to a government committee in Israel, they are preparing for a potential war with Turkey or Turkey. And it doesn't seem to me that it was a defeat for the axis of resistance after all. It seems that the way that Turkey and Israel and the United States are fighting each other in Syria, it just facilitates the situation for the axis of resistance, because it doesn't seem that they're going to get to any sort of agreement anytime soon.
Yeah, look, I doubt that Turkey will ever fight the Israelis. I doubt it. But looking at these messages that are coming out in the Israeli media, we have to read between the lines. And what's between the lines is that there is a rivalry between two vessels over, number one, the loot, how much each one of them is going to get from the corpse of Syria. Okay. The other is how much can they show, which one will show to master in the White House that they are more useful. Okay. So if up until now, Israel has looted all the water in the south, 1/3 of Syria's water reserve. And up until now, there's no armed resistance to it in the south. Similarly, the Turks have looted all the coast and all the resources and the big cities and the museums and all the. You remember, like when the Americans looted Iraq, everybody talked about the loot of the museums. We don't even know what's happening to the museums of Syria. They're not showing us even. They're looting all of it. They're looting both the Israelis and the Turks, by the way, are uprooting some of the oldest olive trees in the world, both in the north Aleppo and so on region, and also in the Golan and the south of Qunaytara region. They're just uprooting them and taking them. Is this how much? Okay, so maybe Turkey will be interested in triggering some resistance in the south of Syria, just to show that, master in the White House, I, as a quote-unquote Muslim vassal, I'm a better governor for you of the Syrian territories than the Israelis. This is possibility. This is where the rivalry happens. But it's not going to be ever Turkey versus Israel fighting each other. But they may, each of them, send their own mercenaries to make the presence of their rival less comfortable and look less professional to master in the White House. This is what the Saudis and the Qataris did in Syria in 2013, 2014. When almost the Syrian military and Syrian government was going to collapse, they've already spent $20 trillion by that point. Sorry, $20 billion by that point. And what happened? This is according to the Foreign Affairs Minister of Qatar at the time. He said, we were out on the hunt. These are the words of the Foreign Affairs Minister of Qatar for the gazelle basically, for the deer, Syria. And as we had the deer in our sights, we turned on each other. This is what happened to the Saudis and the Qataris, because they wanted a bigger part of the loot from Syria, and to show master they serve better. And then they screwed the pooch, basically. They lost the battle in Syria. Now the Israelis and the Turks are in the same condition. They want to prove to the master that they are better at governing and have a a right for more of the loot than the other, and that's what's playing out.
When it comes to the axis of resistance and the support that they're getting from the Muslim world, do you see any sort of differences between Qatar and Saudi Arabia, or they're same? They're the same sort of mindset.
Yeah, look, the Arabic people, the Muslim people, like the rest of humanity, no matter what the religion or cultural background is, have been watching with horror the genocide in Gaza, the destruction of Syria and Lebanon, and the attacks on Yemen and attacks on Iran, and have been wishing that their governments, even the American people, wish their governments didn't participate in this genocide and help the Palestinians. Okay, so that's wall to wall humanity as a whole. And more so, of course, Arabic or Muslim people because of the brotherly connections and family connections and so on. But in Qatar, which is population of citizens is 800,000. That's all the Qatari population. There's 20,000 political prisoners. Okay, this is a huge number, and those are all people in Qatar that oppose how their government is wasting its oil and gas resources on destruction of the Arabic and Muslim world on behalf of the empire, and they're not happy with the presence of American troops. There's more American troops almost than Qatari citizens in Qatar. So this is similar in Saudi Arabia, but you see these two regimes, the Thnayan family in Qatar and the Saud family in Arabia, are vassals of the West, have been allies of the West for decades since the discovery of oil and gas in the region, and have never did anything that their own people want. But so where we see the divergence between the Qataris and the Saudis was that although the Qatari royal family is originally from Najd and is actually a branch of the Saud family and imported by the British and put into the throne in the 1960s, the Qatari family, royal family, thinks that it should rule, not the Saud family, over the Arabs. Okay, and because the Qataris couldn't influence fully the Wahhabi sect that they also believe in, and the Saudis had more control of all the militias around the world, the Wahhabi death squads that roam the planet on behalf of the empire. The Qataris began investing in the Muslim Brotherhood since the 90s as a counterbalance to the Saudi control of the Wahhabi death squads. And as we see, they succeeded more than the Saudis, especially with their alliance with Turkey. And they're spending so much of the Qatari national funds into Turkey to maintain the control of Erdogan, and what that meant in terms of Turkey being on the border with Syria and Iraq and the projection of power into there, and eventually with Turkey's position in NATO and closeness to Europe, that gave Qataris access to things that the Saudis didn't, even though that the Saudis, spend more money on America directly than the Qataris. But Qatar played its hands better. But ultimately, they're both vassals. They're both will be helping the United States destroy more Arabic and more Muslim countries, and that's been the history for the last 80 years.
People in the West they usually divide the Muslim world between Shia and Sunni, but in my opinion, that is not so accurate, because we can separate people, we can divide people who are supporting the axis of resistance and those people who are not supporting the axis of resistance, and they see the axis of resistance as a burden on their shoulders that they don't want it. And after all, do you think, I don't know what could happen to Palestine, to Gaza, to the West Bank, to bring these people, all of them together, to have a mutual understanding? Because this is the very moment, if they reach right now, the Qatari foreign minister spokesman is talking about they're reaching an agreement. They're about to reach an agreement. This is a huge opportunity for these people, for these Muslim brothers to come together to find a permanent solution for Gazans, for Palestine. Do you think they do see it as an opportunity, or they just ignore the outcome of this agreement? They're just going to the same old policies which didn't work for Palestine.
I'm glad that you spoke about the Shia and Sunni. Maybe we should explain to our Western viewers that there is no really this separation didn't exist prior to modern times, and I would say still till today, the majority of Muslims don't speak in those terms, Shia, Sunni. And my late great uncle Ismail Arfi, who was the Mufti of Al Jazeera during the Ottoman times and Deir ez-Zor during the beginnings of Syrian independence, famously said, if being a Shia means, feeling the love and of the martyrdom of Ali, Hassan, and Hussein, and opposing the oppression of Yazid and the Umayyads and their usurpation of democracy in the Muslim state in its beginnings, if that what's make you Shia, then all Muslims are Shia. There's nobody that supports the dictator Yazid and the Umayyads, making an empire. And if being Sunni means following the habits and the way of living that Muhammad, our prophet, did, that means all Muslims are Sunni. Okay, and I would say, look at what's happening right now in Syria. Syria was a country where the majority of Sunnis, quote unquote, are Sufi. Similarly, that's true in Egypt. Similarly, that's true in most of the Arabic and Muslim world. And, they will be commemorating the Prophet's birthday. They will be commemorating the martyrdoms and so on. There'll be, recitations broadcasted on the national television from these holy sites, and people would visit all the shrines, whether they're Shia or Sunni, on the occasions that needed to be having these visits. And now the main target of in Syria for destruction and for killing of any sect are actually the Sunni Sufis. Their preachers are being hunted by the Wahhabis. And look, I grew up in Riyadh, in the heart of Saudi kingdom, between 1980 and 1992. And I don't think a lot of people know this. I lived in a lot of places in the world. And I was a kid, and we'd go to the school. They have, it's a public school, and they had all the religious classes, the Saudi government. And every day I would come back from school. My dad would be asking us, me and my brother, to show him what we were taught specifically in the religious classes that day. And the amount of hate that was being pumped in the religious classes in the public schools in Saudi Arabia against the Shia people, not against the West, not against Christianity or Judaism. It was unbelievable that my dad had to basically deprogram us every day. Okay, after we come back from school, and this is not the same. There's no, you don't go in a Shia community and find them teaching their kids to hate Sunnis. The Iranian education, public education curriculum in the religious classes doesn't have hate for Sunnis preaching. So how are you expecting, to work with such people? It's hard. It's hard. They would rather, as we see, work with the Israelis, work with the Americans, than put their hands with their brothers and sisters, their neighbors, even if they don't want to follow Shiism, which they don't need to. They just need to follow justice and humanity. Those are what makes us Muslim. Love of peace in the name of Islam, love of justice, one of the names of our Creator. And so I know I went on a tirade there, but look at what's happening in the West Bank. I feel once Israel, if it stops as we are right now on the beginnings of this ceasefire, if it stops the war in Gaza, they'll be accelerating their attack on the West Bank, and the Palestinian Authority will be involved in that, and the Arabic, quote unquote, Sunni, they don't represent Sunni countries, will not do anything.
Let's hope for the ceasefire in Gaza, and then I think the situation in the West Bank is much more important right now if we come to some sort of agreement in Gaza. And Laith, please let us know, how can we support your work?
Well, I am first off glad to be with you weekly, Nima. It's gives a great platform to the voices from the region, and helps, of course, with all the amazing viewers that you have that are donating. So go to freepalestine.video. That's our website. You can donate in any currency you'd like. There's different platforms: Stripe, PayPal, Google, Apple. You can pay on all of that, and you can also from there follow us on our different platforms. And if you don't want to do like a direct donation or a monthly subscription on the donation box there, you can follow us on Patreon and on Substack, where you can do also monthly subscriptions. And we're on at least 12 different platforms. Follow us everywhere, please, and share the content. Thank you for this invitation, Nima.
Great pleasure as always, Laith. See you
Have a
soon.
nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.